Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Reclaim TV Friday stream. We're calling this one Building Community, and we're joined by Martin Hawksey today, which is really exciting. We're going to chat with, all four of us are going to chat about, building community on the web, what we've had success in, maybe what hasn't worked, I suppose, and the tools we've been enjoying using, things like that. But before we get into all that, maybe we can kind of all introduce ourselves. Starting, Martin, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, Taylor. Hi. Thanks for inviting me on today's show. So my name is Martin Hawksey. I've had a recent-ish change in career. So 2 years ago, I started working for a Google partner, CTS based in the UK. But long before that, I was kind of heavily into new Google Workspace products, and that's kind of some of that was actually kicked off from being part of a Twitter community that kind of changed my whole life around 2009, which eventually led with working with Marin for a long time. So, excited to kind of explain a bit more of my journey as part of this show.
Yeah, awesome. And also, of course, joined by Amanda and Marin. So thank you all for being here today. So I guess to kind of kick things off, obviously the topic of building community is a big one. I didn't exactly narrow it very much with the title, but I just kind of wanted to start like, what are you doing right now in terms of like what building community? What's your strategy, and where are you building that community right now?
For me, it's 2 years ago. A lot of it was working with Marin at the Association for Learning Technology. So building the community there was, or supporting the community there was an aspect of my role. More recently, it has kind of changed. So I've got my own personal interests, and I'm just trying to bring as many people as along on that journey as I can. So I've got different things that I do as part of that. So as I mentioned, I work for a Google partner. So I'm and the products that I'm working with, Google Apps Script, and more recently a no-code platform called AppSheet. Just trying to generate interest, get people talking about, sharing experience. So I think in terms of community, it's really loose. It's like I recognize some of the names in terms of people who are liking the content that we're producing. People, it's not a formalized walled garden or anything like that. It's very open, so it flows a lot in terms of people coming in and out. I suppose in terms of where I'm focusing my efforts, I do a similar kind of show to this when a fortnightly show where we get guests on and try and just talk about products, bring in guests. But another thing, which is I think a bit more retro, is I run a website called AppScript Pulse, which is a WordPress blog, which I just curate content. So I find things other people are writing about Google Apps Script, and just I don't know if people remember Scoopits. I don't know if Scoopits still exist. It's just finding other content that people have published, linking back to that, providing a small comment. There's a degree of automation in that in terms of pushing stuff out into LinkedIn. I've kind of given up on Twitter since they killed the API. So there, in terms of conversation, it's primarily happening around LinkedIn now in terms of people responding to those posts rather than the WordPress site itself. So it's interesting how that has evolved over time. I don't know if other people have given up on Twitter. Where are the cool kids going these days?
Yeah, it's a big problem. I don't know, maybe even opportunity depending how you look at it, right? With kind of Twitter's implosion and yeah, the API stuff. We've definitely noticed that too. We, you know, kind of used to use Twitter as our de facto completely public
Mm.
platform, right? We had other spaces, forum, we use Discord, things like that. But um we I think for us, it's been a lot of, what tools can we use that don't, introduce a large amount of extra time to
Mm.
integrate. And because of that, yeah, Twitter's just not one of them anymore for us, or X for
Yeah.
that. So
It's a shame, Martin. Like I remember, like many people who are watching this, listening to this, will be aware of your like tags explorer, like tools, and like I know everybody on this call will have used it. Like, and many of us like in the community you used to rely on that partly to kind of track community building on Twitter, like particularly
Mm.
like tracking conversations and like going kind of beyond the broadcast method of kind of just sharing information. I'm really curious how you think like that's changed for you in the last few years, because like I remember when you first started the AppScript Pulse site, and it sounds like it's very much you motoring it, like rather than like lots of different people contributing.
Yeah.
How is that evolving for you?
It's I think it's like a continual evolution in terms of I feel like with the loss of Twitter, let's say it's the loss of Twitter, it's called something else now anyway. I think personally I felt a bit lost for a while, and it's really interesting you mentioned tags and Tags Explorer. That tool was actually created so I could find where I was within the community. So it was basically a network diagram of conversations on Twitter, and I found that really comforting to see my little node floating in space, but connected to all these other people. So right now it feels like those connections are more fragmented. People are going off to different platforms. So I think that's part of the reason that I've kind of doubled down on this AppScript Pulse site. We have a couple of people that do contribute posts as part of that, but yeah, it's mainly me. But I think it's in terms of shift, it's I've moved more to, rather than being part of a network, to being the candlelight that the moths will flutter around and consume content and somehow use that in terms of their own work. Maybe not directly, but it's always nice. We're in a period now where we're going back to events, and for me to go to events and for people to recognize what I've done, have been consuming that for a long time, and just come up and say hello, I think is really nice. And I think it's a real struggle now in terms of going back to that whole idea of establishing where you are within the community. I think it's become harder, and it can be quite lonely sometimes. And I think you have to remind yourself that there's a bigger picture to this, and in terms of consumption or involvement, it's not always obvious what's going on there. And I think that can be quite hard. I don't know if people feel similar to that or have ways to counteract those feelings. Do you feel lonely? Feeling lonely in a big community, I think that's a real challenging thing.
Yeah, I think that just from our experience in Reclaim EdTech, there's a bit of an adjustment that needs to be made when you're just kind of like putting content out there and just wondering like, is anybody out there? Is anybody listening? But what I love is the fact that we still do it. And so I do think that it's kind of a shift in mindset as well, where our motivation for putting stuff out there is like, I love your metaphor about being a candle that the moths can
Mm.
come to. You know, it is that is how it feels sometimes. It's like we're putting out what matters to us so that hopefully the right people can find it. And then I think what makes the biggest difference is having a place for people to, you know, get in contact and actually get together, which is, I think, why Discord for us is so important, and creating an ecosystem of different platforms and tools that people can join us on. Because as we saw with Twitter X, like putting all your eggs in one basket, it can kind of blow back up in your face if things aren't sustainable.
Yeah, and similarly, as you mentioned, like we are, I think a lot of people are kind of looking in the direction of like, all right, well, what can I take ownership of here, and maybe more of this belongs on my website, and then I can, you know, however you manage that, whether it's automated or just simply just copying and pasting links other places, you know, it doesn't have to be complicated, but sort of thinking about where the stuff originates from, I think is something people are, which is, I think, a good result of all this, thinking more about. And I know we are too. Like we obviously at Reclaim, we're very interested in the open source stuff that you can host yourself, and we use a lot of that. But it's not like we don't use any. You know, we use Discord, we use YouTube, we use StreamYard, what we're talking on right now. So we're trying to really intentionally make the choices make sense for us, and, like, you know, combine them with other things we have more control of, or just critically look at where it makes sense to rely on these things and where it doesn't, I think. And we're always rethinking it. You know, there's no perfect answer, but
I think there's also like a balance between, like, you know, I really value having my own domain. And like, that's how I first, you know, became aware of Reclaim, because I was like really looking to have like a place that I had control over. But like, you know, for a long time, I locked down all comments on my site because I was just getting spam, and like really nasty spam at that. And so I thought, okay, you know, I can't be bothered to moderating that. But then, in like, you know, it's a really lonely place. In my blog, there's like 3 comments a year, you know, and like Jim commented on something like twice in the same month, and like my blog sent me an alert, unusual activity, you know, because there were like 2 comments in 1 month. And you know, that, like, for me, I was like, wow, you know, like it's quite a change. But Stephen and Mark in the Discord chat were just talking about like Blue Sky being open now and being you know, we'll like waiting for Blue Sky Federation. And I'm trying so many different networks, and I am completely at sea as to where I can have any conversations that I want to have right now. Certainly not in my blog comments, that is for sure. You know, like, I think the only one who perseveres with those is Jim, which I totally appreciate. But other than that, it's just, you know, it's very, very different.
I don't know if it's my age, but, or, you know, other factors have changed, but back in 2009, Twitter was a huge thing for me in terms of making those initial connections. But now, even towards, you know, end of my time at Alt, where, you know, curating the Alt community on Twitter was part of what I was doing. I was spending less time doing that, and I don't know if there was what changed, if it was the quality of the conversation had gone down, or my focus was elsewhere. And so now, kind of microblogging is not something that really features in my life. It's more into longer form, which is maybe even more retro than retro Twitter. I still live by RSS, so it's great to see Stephen in the chat. So, and it's one of the things in terms of, I mentioned I have a website that's curating content. I'm getting that content from subscribing to RSS feeds. So, and I'm doing that. One of the applications that you can install on Reclaim hosting is TT-RSS. So that's, I even themed it as Google Reader, which was my go-to tool. when Google killed it. I I couldn't live without it. So and still today, it's like one of my daily rituals is to troll the RSS content that I've got. But it's interesting, and I see a general decline in terms of people publishing stuff, and even myself. It's like I've gone down from, probably at my peak I was doing something like a post a week, and now it's maybe a post a quarter. So there is definitely changes and preferences and kind of wider trends. So, but I always found community, and it's that slippery beast and very intangible thing, but it organic. So you kind of just have to go where it goes, or it takes you, and see what you can do. But gone are the days, Maren, when. But it was magical moments back then in terms of getting comments on your blog, and a big change in terms of feeling that you were completely alone just writing stuff. I always remember there's an academic in UK called Tony Hurst, and I was an avid follower of his blog, and the first time he commented on one of my posts was like, fist pump. It was amazing, that sense. And I think that's something I have to keep reminding myself, is letting people know that you value what they're contributing, and making that connection to what they're doing, I think is something that is incredibly valuable in terms of spending time doing, but quite often we don't have time to do that. So it's, if you see something you like, let people know that you like it.
I wonder, Martin, like we are seeing a lot of people on our channels talking about like newsletters, and I wonder whether like we're like more in the age of the newsletter at the moment. Like I know we've got some flex courses coming up on the Ghost like newsletter, and I'm sure Taylor will talk about our own like a new Ghost newsletter blog, but also like the long form comment is really interesting, because that's something that Amanda's been heading up, like reaching out to the community to kind of showcase via case studies, and kind of making more effort to kind of celebrate. So yeah, I don't know, Amanda, if you want to jump in and like talk about that.
Yeah, something that we've always wanted to do, and we're kind of talking about since I first joined Reclaim in 2022, was this idea of showing off our community to our community. And it goes back to what Martin was talking about, of appreciating what other people are doing and taking the time to show it off, I guess. Either giving people that direct feedback, or taking the extra step of sharing it back out to the community. And in our case, we did it by reaching out, letting people know like, hey, we're watching, we're paying attention. I think that is powerful. And then interviewing them, talking to them about what projects they're doing, using, in our case, Reclaim services, and then creating something different out of that, something that can be published, and then sharing that back with the community. And we recently did that, finally set out our kind of launch case study on our new blog site. And this was a conversation I'd had with Suzanne Norman from Simon Fraser University, and what her experience has been like using bulk shared hosting, and how that has supported her overall very much, non-tech related, like non-tech focused, but needing tech to help publishing course. So yeah, Taylor threw that right in the Discord chat. It was a really fun thing to do, and felt really good to share it back out to the community. And it's something that we're hoping to do more of throughout the year. And it is a longer form thing. It does take a little bit more time. It's so you can't really, send them out quickly, but I think it's a labor of love.
Yeah, we're a lot of folks talking about newsletters in Discord right now, and yeah, it is interesting because I feel like there's more newsletter stuff than I've ever seen, but it is maybe 90% basically the same thing as blog posts. It's not, there can be differences, obviously, and for me personally, they go right into my RSS reader because I'm in my RSS reader every day. That's what I'm reading. I don't really want those in my inbox personally, but that is somewhat encouraging to me to see too. Is actually like it's just funny because you used to hear like it's like, oh, blogging is going to completely disrupt journalism and media, and in some ways it has, right? But then a lot of those bloggers went to work for media companies, and then now there's a big shift to like, all right, well, I've left that company and now I'm doing my own newsletter, and you can subscribe to it and pay for it, or there's a free version or whatever. And so it does seem like we're on the cycle, right? Like if it's a 20-year trend, it's about right,
Yeah.
So
I'm keen to pick up on this comment that Mark posted about newsletters of being one-way communication, and I must admit I find that really interesting, because I probably have more people like circle back to me or connect with me in response to a newsletter that like I send out basically a summary of anything I've published in any given month, and like I have like 80 or 90 subscribers, so this is like a very bijou niche personal thing. So basically like a friends and family type newsletter, but so many people like come back to me, and since I've gone freelance, my own newsletter is probably my main source of generating new business, beyond posting anything on like LinkedIn or Instagram or Mastodon or wherever else. And it is very strange. Like I wasn't really expecting it to be a two-way thing either. So and I know that when we send out the Reclaim's monthly roundup with all the gifts, like that's probably where more people then reach out and kind of take action or get in touch than lots of the other stuff. So I'm finding that quite an interesting experience. Like, it isn't a communication, it's not conversation, but it's definitely like not all one way in my experience.
I think that's such a great point, Marin, and it really goes to show that there's something to say for like well thought out and like curated and just a well thought out presentation of content instead of just the constant like micro content, and really that I think I'm not surprised that that's giving you business, because you're able to really show a full picture of what you're doing and who you are, and I think people respond to that, and I think that's why people like the Reclaim Roundup as well, because you get a sense of who we are when you see that roundup, and just how goofy and also how busy we are, and you feel the energy from that. At least I do. So
well, you're making me feel bad. I have a newsletter as well, but it's not. It's basically a push of, so it more traditionally it'd be like someone has subscribed to my blog for email updates when there's a new post. That's all it is. It's just content I've published on this AppScript Pulse website. Each day it will just send out whatever I've published that day to people. So maybe I need to spend a bit more time creating my newsletter content, being a little less lazy. But I think there was a comment as well in the chat in terms of newsletters have just got ramped up in technical knowledge and ability in terms of the email providers are now putting. It's like Maren and I were chatting in terms of setting up her domain, and it's like, I'm going to spout out acronyms now. Oh, have you got your DMARC and SPF all set up right?
Yeah.
So you're in that whole world.
We're not putting love for email right now, Martin. I think when we saw the information that come out about these changes, I think we were all having a collective sigh.
Yeah, and it's not just the technical things that you're setting up on your blog. Mail providers are looking, if you're sending newsletters, they're looking for things like unsubscribe links, who's it coming from, that kind of thing. So quite quickly, these are, for me, it's like my newsletter, I'm not generate everything I do that I don't generate any revenue off. It's I gave up even putting Google ads on my blog. It was just too much pain. But there's a lot of effort that needs to go into these things. And there's so many pitfalls and nuances that you need to know about. But so I could see why a lot of people would struggle with that. My tip, so on my site, it's a WordPress blog, and I think it's MailPoet is the plugin I use for that. I don't know. I know there are various other ones, but I've been using that one for a couple of years now, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm underneath I don't need to buy the premium license because I don't have 1,000 people I'm sending it to, which is fine by me.
Yeah, the email stuff it's tricky. I just put in the Discord the company Mailgun. That's like a email API folks can use, and they have various plugins and integrations as well. Did a pretty good write-up. Obviously, I mean, it's very much in their interest to do a good write-up on how to make sure some of Gmail and I think soon Yahoo changes mean, and it is kind of another thing that makes that self-hosted email hard. As self-hosted email has been near impossible, like completely self-hosted. I mean, really hard for a long time, but this is just sort of another, to me, it's just sort of another one of those things. But I will say from our perspective, using Mailgun, which we use for a couple different things, both like most of the transactional email you may receive from Reclaim about your account is done via that, but also we use it for our newsletters, and it's been pretty good, honestly. And it's not been too hard to maintain in terms of those requirements either, because they as long as you follow their best it's not too bad. So
I wanted to pick up a point actually Amanda made before we went on air that I was just thinking about when we were saying about how do you get away from email, and I think that's one of the things I've become more interested in the last couple of years is kind of synchronous versus asynchronous engagement. And I find community now, like building communities has to kind of work more asynchronously as well as synchronously. So I think, like Amanda was saying, that more people probably watch the show after it's been aired rather than being live online. I know we work with a community that's across lots of different time zones. Like for Martin and me, it's like the tail end of our Fridays now. For Amanda and Taylor, it's like the start of Friday. Some of the people in the chat are in different time zones again. And I find that really interesting, like, because the asynchronous bit is quite hard to get sounding anything more than an afterthought. What do you guys think about that?
Temporal questions. It's just a big ball of timey-wimey stuff. Yeah, I've never really thought of it that way, but it's quite interesting. And I think, it maybe relates back to that whole two-way communication, or is it one way? I don't know. I could get very philosophical about it and creating temporal moments. I don't know. I'm rambling now.
This is an obvious thing to say, I suppose, but I really think the synchronous versus asynchronous is just a matter of who you're talking. Like, everyone has different preferences and can fit that in to their day or lives easier. And I think that actually has something to do with sort of what we've been trying to do here at Reclaim, in that, like, right now, right, we're on a stream. It is 10:30 Eastern time in whatever time zone elsewhere. It's not going to work for everybody. It just won't, right? Like, for me, I'm in Central Time. It's 9:30 in the morning. This is my job, and I'm here, and I'm happy to be here. Other folks are not going to see this live. It's just kind of how it goes. So we've been trying to think of, like, how can we do both and not make it, 2.5 times the amount of work. And because it is, content stuff is like that, right? Like, if you do two things, it doesn't really feel like twice as much work. It feels like more than twice as much work. So we've been trying to think of, like, how can we, do something live, because people like to participate live and it's more fun for us as well, but also make that valuable and easy to find later. And I think we typically get more people watching them after they're out for a couple days. Yeah.
We'd saying, so I do a similar sort of YouTube show, and when a couple of years ago, we were, it's the live aspect. I think it was a big thing for us to do, but part of it was in terms of just getting people commenting as part of the show and just responding to those comments. But the other thing was production. It's like, if we recorded something, we'd end up spending so long just editing it, and then we just use StreamYard, do the production live, and then
here's the trick that we have for that: don't edit anything.
Well, that's it. We with our StreamYard stuff, zero edit. It's like, I might trim the intro clip slightly. What we were doing for the last couple of years as well is a lot of it. What we're doing on YouTube is, it's not very visual. So, and with the tool like StreamYard, you can download the audio. So we take the audio, we put it on SoundCloud, and then RSS comes to our rescue again. We're basically re-aggregating that audio to every podcast platform that we can find. So it goes out to Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, which is dead, Amazon Music. So it's going out to all these different places. And the challenge for us is, then we've put it out to all these different places, and then if people are commenting on it, we just don't have time to go in, or even listening to it. We never go and look at the stats, but it's not a business for us. It's a hobby project. So
sure.
But for me, that was because it's back to the longer form. Our shows are about 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, and I think that's a really nice. It's not the magic YouTube 6-minute moment that people want to consume. So I think it's ideal for people like me who like to listen to podcasts while they're outside, away from screens. So we come back to RSS. RSS is our savior, pushes out. And I read recently that YouTube is actually, they had a beta of, you could provide YouTube with an RSS feed for your podcasts, and it'll turn it into a YouTube clip. So we're going full circle now.
Yeah, I was reading that. That's part of their getting away from Google Podcasts. Is Google's push has been YouTube is their tool for listening to podcasts, and to be fair, it's probably been their most popular tool for listening to podcasts for a long time anyway, right? Just people had to manually upload it there. So I haven't tried it, but I was reading about that it can literally ingest the audio files from an RSS feed and publish them as simple videos. I probably just static picture, but yeah.
I wonder. I do worry about how many trees I'm killing now with all this content, basically ending up on different people, the same content on different people's servers. So, but there we go.
I also think like it's an interesting kind of question around the open side of things, you know, because I think someone in the Discord chat earlier mentioned around, you know, how newsletters don't really contribute to open, you know, open communities and open practice. And like, you know, obviously you can do lots of things to make things searchable and archivable and so on and so forth. But next week, Martin, we have Alan Levine join us on Wednesday because we're like doing a community chat with him on like Open Education Week. And like, I think Alan's done a lot of like work with, you know, Discord in particular to try and kind of build like a sustainable community. And that is the kind of main question that I've got left on my list that I wanted to ask you about, because you've been doing the community thing for like a really long time. I wondered if you have any kind of thoughts on, you know, other than you just keeping going, is there like a secret source of kind of, you know, making it happen long term?
I think it's a hard one. I think you have to. I really like. I think David White has the visitor and resident model in terms of, and I think you just have to accept that people will come in and out of communities, and you know, if they stop for a spell, that's great. I think as well, the people that moderate communities or, you know, be the candle will come and go as well. So, you know, I still follow, you know, even though I've left alt, I still follow the alt members mailing list. I lurk on the side, not contributing. So I've definitely become a visitor to that one. So I don't know. I think as long as there's something to interest someone, you know, hopefully there's enough in terms of your effort in. We're all human. We like to be patted on the head. You know, get that feedback back. I think that, you know, keeps you going in terms of, you know, moving forward with something. The thing that kills community is when usually Google kills the product. So within Google Apps Script, we've had a couple of communities which I've been a moderator on, and the sad thing has been that for a long time there was a really strong community in what was Google Plus, and then Google killed the product. So we've moved into Google Groups, which is entirely email based with a very light web interface. So I think, you know, it's quite interesting to think, you know, did the community die or did it just move? We definitely lost people along the way. So yeah.
Yeah, and it you know, you mentioned that people come in and out of communities, and but also even just obviously everyone engages in community differently, right? Like I am not a big blog commenter. I mean, I would like to be, but it's usually I find myself reading something and my reaction is, that's really cool. I'm not going to type that in a box and hit send. It's not worth reading, right? So I tend to read a lot and comment not very often. And I think there's lots of people like that. There's lots of people who do much more, you know, resident, you know, type stuff. They're commenting more, or even, you know, like writing up their own pieces as responses, things like that. And you know, it's it's not visible when people are just reading your stuff. And that's kind of always why you know, there's a lot of schools of thought around like on things like Twitter or Mastodon or whatever, name a social media or microblogging thing, and people go like, the like button, what's the point of that? It doesn't offer anything. And I don't know that I agree with that personally, because I think it offers a certain type of person a way to say like, yeah, I see this, and I like it. I don't have anything to say that's interesting at this time, and I think that can even be an on-ramp for some folks who are finding a voice in a community too. It's a small thing, but it just keeps popping up for me, right? We have it happen here at Reclaim, where we'll months later we'll get an email from someone who's like, hey, I saw your video on this and it was really interesting, thanks. And I'm like, great, I didn't even know anyone cared about that.
So Maren, emoji reactions. Discuss.
We used to have, when we all first started working online, like in 2017, 18, like we had this big argument about like how useful that is. And now it feels so quaint to even like consider it. But at the time, it wasn't a done thing at all, or at least not in our work environment. But I was just thinking, like, because we were talking about this platform, I think Stephen mentioned, called Discourse, which I haven't used at all. And I'm always kind of amazed by what like wide variety of different platforms people kind of really identify with. And now I think when more people work remotely or from home all of the time, I think that's really increasing. So some people live their lives in like Mattermost or on Slack, or in Google Workspace, and then you become really like habituated into these environments, and the customs around emoji reactions, GIFs, and etc. become really normalized. But like I work with 5 different or so companies at any given time, and they will have completely different norms. So like depending on who I work with on which day, I have to kind of switch between, this is how you respond here, this is where it's appropriate to send a GIF, they have never heard of a GIF, they only operate by email that has like a proper header and footer. Like it's completely different. And I feel that a lot with online communities, like particularly ones that I don't really know that well. Like I'm always like, I have no real idea of what comes across as polite or appropriate, and like
maybe people can solve this one for me. I used to use the winking emoji a lot, and then someone said, in America, that's you're flirting. So I stopped using the winking emoji.
Yeah, I get nervous sometimes about how emoji reactions are interpreted by people, because some of it is that kind of specific to like an area, but I find myself defaulting to whatever the digital code switching is right, Mark, but is like whatever the alt text is on the emoji. Sometimes that gives you a really important like key to what the emoji is actually doing, like because you may think like I see like a lot of people, I'm not going to get into this actually but because we're not going to talk about emojis.
There are tools though, or maybe like Discord and Slack is where I'm using emoji reactions the most, and both of those let you like either hover over or long press to see what the keyword in their like search is. And I agree, I use that too, but there are other tools that don't let you do that, and it drives me crazy. I remember Amanda, when we were both pretty new at Reclaim, we even came up at one point where we were both like, hey, I think we have to recontextualize how we think of the thumbs up emoji as a reaction, because to me, a relatively anxious person, thumbs up is like sarcasm, like it comes off as like, cool, man, like I don't really care. But we use, wow, and that's amazing. that Mac OS feature that does those reactions. But apparently I have that enabled still. But we use it at Reclaim, and like in Discord it comes through too as sort of like 10-4, gotcha, like and that I think is how most people perceive it. but that's not how I initially perceived it, you know.
A feature which brings us back to newsletters is in my consumer Gmail, there is now emoji reactions to emails, and I'm using that so much more. And then in my work email, which is also Google, that feature isn't there, and it's like I miss it. And Myron will know I come from a position where I was completely against emojis, and now I'm like the biggest emoji fanboy. It's like, give me an emoji, give me it now.
I think there's a blog post in that, Martin. Version to emoji reactions. But I was gonna say, like, the person in my life who uses emojis the most is my mother. She's in her early 80s and she's an avid texter. And my mother learned how to type on manual typewriters. So, you know, she was like trained as an accountant, so she types very fast. And because a manual typewriter has a carriage return, that's how she texts. So it's like return, send. Like, so you get like 25 messages in like, you know, very quick succession. But the only emoji that my mom uses to sign off any message whatsoever is a kiss with a heart. And so my mom's and my text exchanges is like pages of, you know, smooching, like the entire text message. And like the other day, someone else saw my phone, a friend of mine, and she was like, wow, you know, are you having like a real romantic exchange? I'm like, no, that's my mom, you know, and that's her only emoji. And I have tried to teach her that this is not an emoji, like, but never mind, you know, it's too late for that. So yeah, so I have to smile so much because every week I have that. I mean, I'm so lucky to have that, but I also think sometimes it just makes me giggle. So
I will spend time just looking at ASCII art for. I don't know if you've come across that, but pre emoji. This is your old school emoji, but I used to work with a colleague who's Japanese, and there's some really nice ASCII art emojis for bowing and things like that. So there are occasions I'll go and find. I don't know it off by heart. I'll go and find the ASCII art for bowing or praising someone and use that instead. The algorithms will never understand that.
Yeah, once you put that through the sentiment analysis, it doesn't make heads or tails of her curly line UTF characters 1,000. Cool. Yeah, I kind of miss ASCII art, and I still am of I still will do the very old school, like colon open parenthesis smiley face in text and stuff, because I don't know. That's just sometimes so
I'm similar in that it goes, do you want this emoji? And I'm like, nope.
No.
Yeah, because it's a choice. Sometimes you know, it's like, no, don't autocorrect to that slightly smiling face. Just my colon with the parentheses, like the person I'm sending this to will get the vibe.
Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting though, because I think that is exactly the kind of nuance I think is so hard to pin down. And I think in a community kind of context or building, you know, professional sort of friendships and relationships, like those things really matter. And I think that's a really hard thing, like you know, where people often kind of, you know, talk about community, but they don't walk the walk. And I think in order to say the right things in the right way, you have to put in the time to kind of learn when, you know, when you say what and how. And I think that's something that, you know, we are all doing in different ways, is that you spend the time engaging and you're learning the language in the right way. So I think that's a super interesting observation.
It's interesting as well how people, with, you know, going to the typing of emojis, how people make that their own. I think Lorna Campbell is someone I think people will know, very respected in the European community. I think all hers are upside down, so it's the reverse direction. And I've got another friend, Alan Fitzenberg. He doesn't use the mouth; he uses the squiggly bracket instead. I don't know what that one's called. So it's nice to see people personally, take ownership of that and make it kind of their signature way. And I think thinking of community is, recognizing people in different ways, but through the text form, in terms of what people say or how they react to stuff. I think it's quite interesting. And
I mean, we've
helps
got
with that connection.
Absolutely. We've got someone at Reclaim who always uses one particular emoji to react to things. And I never feel comfortable using that emoji because it's the little sparkles, because I feel like when you see little sparkles, you're like, oh, that's Pilot. Pilot something. And I can't use the sparkles because then people are think I'm Pilot and I'm not Pilot.
That's it. Yeah, that is. I feel really the emoji reaction stuff, emoji in general, I guess, are such an interesting, in some ways, I think, microcosm of kind of what we're talking about here in terms of, building community is a big, large, nebulous thing that takes time to change, and it's a cultural thing as much as it is, we're using, in our case, tools, technology to do it, but it's not really about that stuff. Emojis kind of, this is maybe a horrible analogy, but like emoji's kind of similar for me. Like, what is emoji? It's literally just some characters that we've decided can have images associated with them. And it's existed for actually a long time in some ways. But now it's everywhere. And I definitely changed how I feel about using it too. And, one of the things we talk about a lot at Reclaim is with any of the stuff we do with community building is that we have to try and, meet people where they are to some extent, right? And by that, I mean, we do video stuff, we do the roundup for newsletters, but that's available as RSS. You don't have to get it as an email. And we also have a blog, that's for more regular, smaller announcements. And we want to try to do all of it while keeping it to be manageable time-wise for us, because it's not like we make any, money from you watching the stream. We're not doing that. This is more about just getting folks to be comfortable in the space and ask questions and, attract new people to use some of we hope our hosting services, but really more in general, like the tools that we're excited about, right? Wherever you host them. It's the hardest part of that has been trying to stick with it and see, like, what do people think about this? Over time, and try to be more regular with the things we're doing. And we're starting to see, I think, some payoff of like folks showing up for these Friday streams to discuss them and people mentioning them in email conversations with us. But it took a while, and it's kind of hard to know, like, if anyone is even, if it resonates with anyone, long tail.
Something as well, I think it just occurs to me is that I've not thought about for a long time is hashtag communities, which, something that came out of Twitter originally, and I think in terms of history. And I still tag stuff. So on LinkedIn, I still tag stuff, but I feel that people are less looking for hashtag communities. But platforms still support it, but I feel people are doing that less. I don't know if that's things you're seeing as well in terms of how people are coming together, whether the hashtag has died or it's still strong.
Yeah, I feel like I'm seeing that less and less too. And I think on one hand, I've always chalked it up to just less of the platforms do as good a job, I think, as Twitter did, right? Twitter, once they did support it anyway, right? It wasn't always actually like a official thing used. But it was, you know, there were Twitter clients that you could follow a specific hashtag, and even eventually the official Twitter stuff kind of let you do that. There are tools like tags that let you explore it, and it kind of comes down to API stuff. I don't know. Probably LinkedIn does a decent job of it, but I'm not on LinkedIn all the time. But one thing I do know is that LinkedIn is, you know, pretty much everything you do requires a login. So that kind of, I think, dampens some of that for folks. And then you've got other things like I've been enjoying Mastodon, but by the nature of the technicals, and we won't go into it, of how Mastodon works, hashtag communities are really hard to get a full sense of what's happening across all of the Fediverse, right? You can't right now really always know of, oh, these are all of the posts that use this across any Mastodon instance. It doesn't really work that way right now. Maybe it will work that way someday. Maybe there's other tools or other platforms, like, you know, maybe Blue Sky can do that. I don't know. But I think, honestly, I chalk that largely up to Twitter, because I think it did it so well. And now that we have less folks using that, I'm not really there much anymore myself. None of the other platforms do it the same way. And I think that has something to do with it, but it might not be the whole picture.
I think
we're all dying to know, Maren. What is Silent Sunday?
We're nearly out of time, so I'm going to try and condense it. I don't really know that much about Silent Sunday or Silent Sundays, but that is the only hashtag that I currently use. And basically, as far as I can tell, it's people posting on social media without words, and you don't post anything else because it's a Silent Sunday. So it kind of encourages you to use social media less. And I usually post a picture of a walk I've been on, or, you know, a cup of tea or something kind of peaceful. And so I tried this on all the different platforms that I'm on other than LinkedIn. And it's surprisingly, like, that is the most engagement I get every week with anything I post. So clearly people like being silent on social media. So that is, my last contribution. God, this hour has whizzed past.
Yeah, I hope the spammers don't pick up on that. Could be less silent.
Yeah, that's true. Advertise your Mindfulness Sunday app.
Yeah, well, Maren, you're right. The hour has flown, and we really appreciate you, Martin, for joining us and chatting with us today all about community. And I think that we are also really appreciate the folks that are in the chat too, who have been keeping conversation going. It's been really interesting to see. So thanks for joining.
Thanks so much.